Hey, Giants fans, this is Chris Franklin from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome back to Talk is Cheap, the Giants podcast, where we discuss everything and everything New York Giants. Now, before we begin, I want to remind you guys that you can read our content on NJ.com/Giants and make sure to bookmark that and get the latest Giants news and analysis. Now, we have a great show lined up for you today in terms of that. I'm joined by NJ Advanced Media Giants beat reporter Darryl Slater. We're going to go over Daniel Jones and the issues and struggles that he had in his preseason game. We're also going to talk about Brian Daboll and the decision that's going to basically affect his future with the team. And we're going to take a quick look at the defense, at a key defender who is going to basically help out on that side of the ball and make everything go. But before we do that, Darryl, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Chris. Always good to chat with you. And, of course, the Giants today wrapped up training camp, preseason finale on Saturday against the Jets. Jets aren't going to play their starters. I would be very surprised if the Giants played any of their starters in that game. So typical backup bowl preseason finale as usual. And so we have this little extra week now before week one, but today really the 18th and final training camp practice for the Giants with cuts coming up on Tuesday.
It's a tradition. It's like the master tradition, or unlike anything else, the backups fighting for their lives in terms of that. But before we get into the preseason finale, we're going to talk about Brian Daboll, and it's looking like he's going to put his own future with the team in his hands. You know, he's going to, thinking about this more like to his play sheet. He's going to be the person in charge of calling plays for the offense. Now, that's a big undertaking, a lot more offensive meetings and controlling everything. Do you agree with the move, and do you think it will dramatically change the offense?
Well, at times last year he did take play calling away from Mike Kafka, who had that job entirely, as far as we know, in 2022, and that was Kafka's first ever experience calling plays in 2022. And everyone kind of agreed that even though the Giants' offense wasn't spectacular in 2022, they did exceed their very low expectations that people had from him. And look, they won a playoff game in Minnesota. You can't really argue with that. And then things went off the rails last season in so many ways, and certainly with quarterback attrition and offensive production and Brian Daboll's drama within his coaching staff. And that included taking play calling away from Mike Kafka at times. Now, starting in the spring, Daboll, and we know he has an extensive track record of calling plays, most recently, of course, with the Bills and Josh Allen, which is how he got this job in the first place. And going back to the spring, he was calling plays. So everything tracked toward what he basically confirmed today, that he, of course, will be. I mean, it would be a shocker if he said, no, actually, I'm going to have Mike Kafka do it. So that would be insane. It was confirming the obvious that he will be calling plays from the get-go. I would be shocked if he gives it up this season. It's a hot seat year for him. He was coach of the year in 2022, but last season was such a mess that he has to deliver results. Look, I don't know if what would it take to keep his job. Certainly if they have a great year, he's going to keep his job. But anything less than that, I think there's some wiggle room given the state of the roster. I don't think they have to make the playoffs for him to keep his job, but he's betting on himself in a hot seat year. And I think the move, is it the right move? I think it certainly makes sense. I guess if I was in his shoes, I probably would do that. I mean, he has a lot of experience. Kafka has less. How will that affect the dynamic within his coaching staff? I think ultimately Kafka's a guy who will put on a good face and be a good soldier, even if he clearly wanted to leave. I mean, he wanted to interview for the Seahawks OC job after he didn't get their head coaching job, and that would have been a play calling OC job under Mike McDonald, who is a defensive minded head coach, of course, in Seattle. And Brian Daboll blocked him from doing that, which is and now he's demoted him, which is quite an interesting move. I think we all saw this coming from the minute that he blocked him from doing it, because at that point it was sort of like, I think everyone assumed it was possible Daboll would call the play. So not only did he block him from leaving for now what would be a promotion, it wasn't at the time technically. So, I mean, the NFL is a cold business. Obviously, these guys are well compensated, and clearly Mike Kafka is going to be just fine after this year. He'll land on his feet. I would be surprised if he's back with the Giants. Now, they all could get fired. Everybody could get fired, Brian Daboll and everybody. But I'd be surprised if he's back. I think he'll play it out probably the last year of his contract, given how these assistant coach contracts go, and he'll leave. But yeah, I think, will the offense look different? I mean, has been his offense, so that's one thing to remember. I mean, Kafka was calling Daboll's offense. So I don't think you'll see a stark difference in that. Will you see a difference in production? I think ultimately that comes down to the players. Like, it's a Jimmy's and Joe's thing as much as an X's and O's, right? So, can they replace Saquon Barkley's production? All the questions we've been trying to address or, putting out there since the spring and the offseason, the O-line and all that stuff, those are still there. So today was just Brian Daboll confirming the obvious, but certainly he's putting it on himself in a hot seat year. There's no doubt about that.
Now, I can only imagine when Kafka walks down the hallway and he smiles and you see Daboll just give that little smirk or whatever, and just, what is he muttering under his breath? Like, wait a minute, I could have been in Seattle. I could have done whatever I had to. And then, yeah, good luck. It's going to be fun to see what happens in terms of that. Now, we're going to go to another from one former quarterback to the current quarterback, Daniel Jones. Now, where to begin? He struggled early in his last preseason game against the Texans, and where he threw 2 interceptions before getting back on track. Finished with 11 of 18, 138 yards. He's trying to move on from that past performance by going against the Jets in joint practices. And from your vantage point, how did he look against the Jets defense?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, as you mentioned, Jones had 3 drives against the Texan starters, then 2 more against the backups. And he sort of polished it up against the backups, but really what's applicable is how he played against the starters, and he was 2 of 6 for 18 yards and two interceptions, and that comically bad pick 6, and just a horrendous return to game action for him for the first time since early November last year, coming off the torn ACL. So just an absolute disaster. It couldn't have been any worse. I don't think he'll play in the preseason finale. So really his entire spring experience, or his summer exposure to opposing starting defenders will be that game, the 3 drives against the Texans starting defense, and then what we saw Wednesday in Florham Park, where I think he got 31 reps against the Jets. Of course, their starting defense, a single one-off joint practice in Florham Park, Giants at Jets, and clearly the Jets are vastly more talented. They have drafted better, which is the big reason for that. I mean, even setting Aaron Rodgers aside, I mean, the talent they have drafted in recent years absolutely laps what Joe Shane has done. So I think that was very evident with what happened on the field, especially with how Aaron Rodgers played against the Giants. Secondary, yes, they are undermanned. And I think even if they had their starting number 2 outside corner, Cordell Flott there, I don't think that would have made much of a difference. Anyway, in terms of how Jones played against the Giants, the Jet defense, you can talk about Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed. Sauce Gardner, best cornerback in the NFL. I mean, the kid's on his way to being a first ballot Hall of Famer. And the Malik Neighbors matchup didn't really mount to much. I mean, Neighbors had the deep ball drop. He had a couple catches that were less, that were just unremarkable. But a lot of short passes, a lot of run game stuff for the Giants in this practice. It was, I don't know, lackluster, uninspiring, but it wasn't a disaster. I don't think Jones played. He had a couple errant passes, but he was competent. Now, are you going to win a lot of games playing that way? Look, I know training camp, you have to compartmentalize it, right? So these guys are working on certain things, certain days, whatever. Malik Neighbors said that they lost the day. Other players and coaches have spun it differently, and certainly people who covered the practice have spun it in their own certain ways. But I think if you just look at it, it's okay to just say it was, it doesn't have to be one thing or the other. It was, it was a competent showing against a really, really good defense, probably the best defense in the league, certainly was last year, where they look like an offense that's a work in progress still, which is what they are. It would have been a real big surprise if they came out and lit it up against the Jet defense. This is a Giant team that's going to have to win methodically this year, and certainly having to lean on their defense. I mean, that's evident in how little offensive firepower they have outside of Malik Neighbors, or proven offensive firepower, at least, not even that he's even proven. So I don't think anything was super surprising there. Jones, he did some fine enough things. It wasn't anything flashy. But I think that obviously, we're in this position with Daniel Jones still, where not that you were going to get answers this summer from how he played in preseason games and joint practices. Like, oh wow, he's the guy now. No, I mean, no, come on. But I think we're all still just waiting and seeing, right? I mean, this is not just hot seat year for him. This is like the last chance year. It's more than what Daboll's dealing with. So, I think so that'll be it for Daniel Jones, I would think, for the preseason. And the next step is September 8th against the Vikings.
Very nice. Very nice. And we're going to stick with Jones here in terms of what you mentioned, Sauce Gardner, what he had to say in that post-practice press conference. He was asked about what it was like to go against Daniel Jones in practice, and he paused a moment, and he was a little late on his answer, and a little bit later in his answer, and Gardner later said that he was distracted by something. What? I would be curious to know what that was that distracted him, but it seems like Daniel Jones is in a tough spot right now with the season coming up, and there's a potential out clause coming with his Giants contract, and there's questions on offense, besides him. Do you think the Giants put him in a position to succeed this season?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. That's been the question about this kid. This kid, not even a kid anymore. This guy, going back to the very start of his career. As far as the Sauce Gardner stuff, he was looking over at the Jets PR staff because he was like wanting them to like basically bail him out. Like, it's not. I mean, obviously he couldn't think of anything nice to say about Daniel Jones because he wanted to crap on him. Like, let's be honest. That's what he wanted to do. I mean, he was trying to hold back his trash-talking impulses after having waved goodbye to the Giants rather on the field, blown kisses toward them, taunted him a little bit. Obviously he's a guy who puts his emotions on his sleeve, super confident, and as well he should be. We all love that. We all love when people show their emotions. And so certainly, and by we, I mean in our business. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that, okay, so, right, he heaped praise without pausing and awkwardly in any of that on Malik Neighbors. So I don't know what order, I forget the order of the questions, but he was asked about Jones, and he just couldn't think of anything but like a simple milquetoast line to say about the guy, and then just was like awkwardly, trying not to say this guy is a joke or whatever his impulse would have been. I mean, that's just me exaggeratingly assuming whatever. But have they done enough to? Yeah, I think the protection is upgraded, especially in the interior line. Their line has played pretty well. The continuity's got to be a concern. I think at the line they still haven't had a single snap of their 5 starting linemen together. You talk about Andrew Thomas, John Runyon, John Michael Schmitz, Greg Van Roten, and Jermaine Illuminor. Now, mainly because of the 2 shoulder injuries to Schmitz and now Runyon. Runyon's on the shelf right now. Looks like he'll be ready for week 1, but it's still like the guys who've been out there have performed well, and we know what Andrew Thomas will give you, and obviously Illuminor will be an upgrade from Evan Neal. So I think the protection is better. Losing Saquon Barkley and losing Darren Waller, he didn't give him anything last year, but where's the playmaking going to come from? Like, I think you're asking a lot to. I mean, Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, those guys are fast, but are they high-level NFL receivers or even medium level? That we don't know. We still don't know. What Darius Slayton is. They're going to put a lot of neighbors in year 1. Is he ready for it? I think if he doesn't have an amazing year, it doesn't mean he's going to be a bad player. Teams are going to focus their coverage on him a ton. Yeah, I think they've done over the course of – they have made efforts, not all of which have succeeded, to give Daniel Jones protection and playmakers. And he certainly has upgraded protection this year. I think that's clear. I think Runyon, Illuminor, a healthy Andrew Thomas. You're asking now. You need Schmitz to take a step forward. He had a bad rookie year. Van Roten, really good rookie year. Really, really old. He's he's not my age, but he's 34. He's old for NFL years, and so you're asking him to stay healthy and to replicate a really good year last year that he had in Vegas with Carmen Brasillo. So. Yeah, I think the protection's better. At some point, though, a quarterback has to elevate the guys around him. There's not going to be necessarily a perfect situation. We were talking about this the other day. Like, could Daniel Jones win with the 49ers? Well, they have a great situation around Brock Purdy, and people say he's a system quarterback, and that's fine. But how many teams are like that with the situation around the quarterback and every other position is pristine? It's just not how it works. You have to, as the quarterback, if you're going to be even a top 13 12. I'm just putting somebody above like the middle ground and just a few notches above that. You have to be a guy who can at times elevate, and not just at times, oftentimes elevate the players around you and overcome deficiencies and overcome, attrition and injuries. And we can't just sit here and say, can't hem and haw. Well, what if we get him this? What if you get him that? What about the injuries? And enough. The time for excuses is over. I mean, if he doesn't produce, the guy, they just try to divorce the guy by trading up for Drake May. I mean, come on. They don't want him to be their quarterback. If they had not won too much down the stretch last year. I keep coming back to this. They were 2-8. They were on track to get into Jaden Daniels, Drake May territory. They blew it. They finished 4-3. So, but have they done enough? I think certainly the answer would have to, if it's a yes or no answer, it'd be yes. I think it's somewhere between the two, though, given that Joe Shane's track record of acquisitions has not been great, especially when it comes to drafting players and especially drafting linemen. Evan Neal, Josh Azudu, 2 big whiffs. So we'll see. I think whether they have done enough or haven't, this is it for him. And I think he has to perform at a really high level to be back. I think if he's average, it's going to be too easy to just kick him to the curb and move on with a quarterback. Of course, then it's like that's the nightmare, right? If he's average and they're average and they don't draft high enough, obviously those are things we're going to get to down the road. But that's all worth considering as the season unfolds.
Hey, you never know. Maybe Trey Lance is going to be available in the future to be up there. It's so bad. But, I want to ask you this. You mentioned this in terms of in terms of what they were doing around him and try to help him out. Sometimes you need the guy you drafted pretty high to be your franchise guy. Do you think if he has it in him to be beyond a game manager per se, and do you think he can elevate the players around him in order to say maybe sneak in and get that 7th seed if everything falls into their lap?
No, I don't think you're winning a Super Bowl with Daniel Jones. And if you're not doing that, then what's the point, right? I think if you're in the middle ground, what's the point? Now, if everything goes right, sure, I think that they could. They could sneak in. This is a team, they won 6 games last year with a completely disastrous quarterback situation. So, and they were in the playoffs in 2022 as a wild card. So, with him as their quarterback. So, sure, I think it's possible. He has that in him, and they won a road playoff game with him. And so he's got the best coach that he's had in his NFL career so far. That's an extremely low bar when you're comparing him to like Pat Shurmur and Jason Garrett in terms of the guys who are calling the plays. But I think that's possible. Do I think they're going to make the playoffs this year? No, but I wouldn't. You'd be silly to say that's outside the realm of possibility given what's happened in the past.
Nice. And we're going to switch to the other side of the ball now and look at the Giants' biggest defensive acquisition in terms of Brian Burns. He's one of the top pass rushers in the league. From what you've seen in training camp so far, what can we expect from him this season?
And we'll see about Kavon Tibido, but this should give Kavon Tibido more opportunities. The issue is they're going to rush 4 a lot. They're not going to blitz as much, and they're going to ask these guys like Lawrence. Well, they're going to ask they're going to ask Lawrence and Tibido and Burns to win in a 4-man pass rush. And so Burns has been very good so far. I've been impressed by him. He's got a really high bar to clear if he's going to justify that contract. That is a win now contract, like win now move contract that the Giants gave him. Like that's something like a team that's trying to win now would do, not rebuild. And to be clear, the GM and the coach have to start winning. So I guess it makes sense to some degree, even if they're not a team on the brink of like making the NFC Championship or making the Super Bowl or whatever. They gave up significant draft asset for him, and that giving up that cost him a chance to get Kool-Aid McKinstry or Kamari Lassiter in the 2nd round, which is something that could definitely come back to bite them, given how their secondary has looked and how badly they probably needed a better corner to play opposite Deonte Banks. But Yeah, I think that he'll be fine. I think he'll be fine. I think he's the least of the. He's certainly one of the least of their concerns of the defense.
Nice. Now, if he is going to get a lot of that attention, you mentioned Thibodeau. Do you think he has it in him to really take advantage of that opportunity and potentially rack up the sack total or the pressures or hurries and really affect the quarterback?
He's a fascinating player because he has had these moments of absolute brilliance going back to his rookie year. And then if you just look at it by sacks, which is okay, those are important, right? I mean, he did have 11 and a half sacks last year. He had 4 as a rookie. So okay, that matters, right? But if you just look at his efficiency, and I'm looking it up as we talk, in terms of PFF, Pro Football Focus, which again, it's not gospel, but he was a pretty good pass rusher in terms of the efficiency last year, with a 75 pass rush grade and 72 the year before as a rookie. You know what? That's why is it so high? Because I was foolishly looking, because PFF defaults you. I was like, what in the world? Defaults you to the preseason. I was like, good grief, what am I talking about? So I knew the numbers were lower. These are the actual numbers from his regular season. When you toggle down to the regular season and postseason. His efficient. The reason I brought it up is his efficiency has not been particularly great. He had 43 pressures last year, 45 as a rookie. PFF had him for 13 sacks and 4 as a rookie. Okay, so those are pretty good raw numbers, but in terms of, how many, he's getting a lot of pass rush snaps, obviously, right? So his pass rush grades in PFF, and these are out of 100. It's pretty simple for anyone who's gone to school to understand, like a grade out of 100. 62.9 last year and 67.3 the year before. That's just for pass rush, not for total defensive, just how he's done it as a pass rusher. So clearly they do not, and they have some pretty astute eyes watching these guys, they do not regard him particularly highly in terms of his pass rushing efficiency. It would be a shorthand way of just saying that. Look, he's not terrible. Like, and he's very good. I think he's got significant potential. And so can he put that all together and have a year where he is, super impactful? Well, he's never played opposite a guy like Burns before, so that'll be, if he doesn't do it this year, you got to wonder if he's ever going to.
Yeah, and the one thing I think Shane Bowen's going to have a lot of fun, especially as a former outside linebackers coach using these guys. I think he's going to have a field day with them. The one thing I want to see is, our offense is really going to start to attack them by doing a lot of that outside zone play, running directly at them, trying to wear them out on first and second down to make them not be as efficient as they were before when it comes to the passing situations. And that's going to be the fun cat and mouse game that you'll see. I think you'll see as the season progresses, because I mean, we know how much when it comes to these pass rushers, they're going to pin their ears back. They're going to try to get that, but our teams are going to try to undercut them not only with the outside zone but the draws and everything else. And for the Giants, I think when I look at this roster, I think it's a good problem to have what they have at the edge rusher spot and its defensive line. So I think there's a lot that Bowen can do with there, and hopefully for them, they can get enough of those stops to get that offense, because their offense is going to need a lot of tries to get that ball moving down the field and keeping these games close and interesting. Now, there's a final topic that we have tonight, and we're looking right now. We're recording this on a Thursday night, but roster cuts are looming around. On Tuesday, teams have to get their active rosters down to 53 players, and sometimes there are trades that are made to address a position of need, with teams that are making deals and players they would likely cut. The Giants have already traded defensive tackle Jordan Phillips. Darryl, are there any other players that you think you could see being traded, or do you see the Giants potentially making a deal to address a specific position? And if so, what position would it be?
No, I don't. I mean, they were going to cut Jordan Phillips, and so might as well get something for him. I don't think their roster is in a situation where there's a lot of guys who they're going to get much significant for. And I think if any trades obviously happen, they'll be very low profile. In terms of now there could be waiver wire acquisitions that are made. That's worth considering too, because the Giants are 6th in the waiver claim order, which at this point of the year, is based on the previous year's draft order. So they could put in a bunch of claims for guys and wind up getting awarded a bunch of them. Just, it's simple. Like, I don't know if people understand how that works, but like, say there's like player A is claimed by if as long as nobody in the top 5 of the waiver claim order also claims that player who the Giants want, then the Giants get the player. If somebody above them claims it, then the highest team that does the claiming gets them anyway. So I think that the positions to watch there would just generally speaking be safety and inside linebacker, because they have some injury attrition going on there right now. Deontay Johnson is a pretty interesting undrafted rookie who's dealing with an injury right now. He could be in the mix, as a backup inside linebacker. Micah McFadden, who is their starter next to now not an every down player, but a starter nonetheless next to Bobby Okereke. He's hurt. So inside linebacker, pretty banged up spot for the Giants, which is one they could certainly address with waiver claim safety as well. Now, safety stuff is depth guys. Javarius Owens, who's their draft pick from last year or the year before, who is a backup player, is hurt. And so those are some lower profile. And look, all the waiver claims, you're talking about guys who are, and Owens was a 7th round pick last year, but you're talking about guys who got cut by other teams, just to be clear here. So there could be some semi-notable players, but this is a way for teams to kind of backfill backup spots or I guess potentially, like if there's a surprise cut, someone who could emerge as a starter. I mean, you think about Jason Pinnock, who's a Giants strong safety right now. He was a waiver claim after the Jets cut him after just 1 year. I believe Nick McLeod was a waiver claim. He would be an important backup in their secondary. That is true on McLeod in 2022, and same year as Pinnock. So they got those guys, and they've both been productive players. Obviously, Pinnock played or started every game last year. So, I think those are the positions to watch. Now, they have in terms of attrition in the secondary, they do have 16 starts for Pinnock last year, not 17. Point remains, but he's a starter for them. They have Cordell Flott, their number 2 outside corner. That's a significant injury. Like, Flott had not been playing well. Maybe he was going to eventually lose his job into McLeod. But, I mean, geez, you're talking about those are your 2 guys for starting outside corner. I mean, that is not ideal for the spot opposite Deonte Banks. That has to be a significant concern. That is why they were so disappointed, and you saw it in Hard Knocks, that they were not able to get McKinstry or Lassiter. They clearly did not want to have to slide Cordell Flott out of the slot. And now they're going to start Drew Phillips, a 3rd-round rookie in the slot. It's a super inexperienced secondary, and you saw the ugliness that could yield with what happened in Florham Park, where they got picked apart by Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. Garrett Wilson, obviously, we know it goes without saying Aaron Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history, but Garrett Wilson, a superb receiver. So you're talking about really good talent they're playing against. But nonetheless, they're going to play against very talented receivers and quarterbacks throughout the year, even if they're not at the Wilson-Rodgers level. So, So the secondary has some concerns. I think, inside linebacker and safety would be the spots to watch for waiver claims, I think, defensively, certainly.
See, Darryl, that information is the reason why you were awarded one of the best top beat writers in the country, man. That was good stuff on this podcast, man. So keep up the good work, and I'm looking forward to reading your coverage of Saturday's game. You know, I know it's going to be the backup bowl, but it's still always interesting. There's always little nuggets that happen there. So I'm looking forward to reading that, and everybody else who's listening to this podcast can read it as well too. Just go to NJ.com/Giants and follow on Darryl and eventually Ryan Novolinsky as well too. You'll see all of their content on there and going from there. So, Darryl, I thank you very much for joining me tonight. It's been great talking to you about the Giants, and hopefully we get to talk to you pretty soon. Thank you very much. So guys, thank you everybody for listening. Have a good night.